Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. I'm joined today by Gregg Braden. Hi, Gregg. How are you?
Hello, John. Hello, Penny. We're missing Kingsley today. I'm coming to you from the early monsoon rain seasons of the high desert of New Mexico.
And Penny Kelly, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, and I am still in the very soggy Southwest Michigan.
We have a very interesting topic today. We're going to talk about preparation and how do we get ready for the big changes that are coming downstream. So stay with us. You're going to find this quite interesting. To just kick things off here, let's go around our small table today and say what's on your mind. So Penny, let's start with you. What have you been thinking about?
We don't have time for all the stuff I've been thinking about and worrying about and carrying on about, but the main things at the moment are the increasing moves that the U.S. is making in Ukraine. We're just provoking problems for ourselves. The second thing that's really big on my mind is the march toward financial disaster. And the other thing, much more recent, is the whole Julian Assange free thing. It's like, okay, what are they up to freeing him right at this moment?
Gregg Braden, what are you thinking about?
I am very closely watching events happening in the U.S. I mean, it's no secret. The U.S. is provoking war. There's no effort toward peace. And the very unsettling developments over the last 48 hours. The strike on Crimea, the Crimean civilian beach, the Russian ambassador came out and directly implicated the U.S. and said that we are now a fair target because we are enabling this escalation in the warfare. Iran has now said that U.S. is a fair target because we're enabling what is happening. And Penny, I just watched the whole Assange thing as well. I think what is happening is they wanted him to admit to wrongdoing, and they wanted there to be a penalty, so that I think what they're trying to do is discourage what we have called whistleblowers in the past.
Right.
And they want them to know that even if they're not in this country, that there is a penalty to be paid.
Thank you very much. There's another aspect of the Assange situation, and that is that apparently in the Trump administration and Pompeo, they had documented the fact that the CIA was going to try to assassinate him. If they went to trial, they were very concerned that that would all come out. Let me set this up by saying that this is Wednesday, the 26th of June in the afternoon when we're taping this. And just this morning, I got an email message, a report from an interview with Kim.com. And Kim.com, if you're not familiar with who he is a very well-known figure within the IT space and the internet space, and was around way at the beginning and has become very influential in that space. And this is an interview that he had with Alex Jones. And if you don't like Alex Jones, then just discount that part, but listen what Kim has to say. Kim, and I'd encourage you to go read the whole interview because it's an hour-long video, or watch it. That's an hour-long interview, and we can put the link down below in the notes for this session. Kim says the United States is now $35 trillion in debt. 30% of all taxes that are being collected by the U.S. government go into interest payments now. That money is not used for anything other than paying down the interest on the debt. Well, the debt increases by $1 trillion every 3 months. The U.S. is financially completely, excuse the language, fucked. Because of all U.S. debt, combined with all U.S. unfunded liabilities, meaning funding that the U.S. has to provide in the future, is already higher than all U.S. assets combined. So that means that everything that Americans own, everything that American businesses own, every piece of land, every piece of assets in the United States is valued at $207 trillion. But the combined debt and unfunded liability of the U.S. is already $316 trillion. This means the United States is already completely bankrupt. And when there is no more money printing based on the reserve currency status that the US has, it's going under. It's a complete economic collapse. And this is why they are fighting in Russia and China in an approach to try and prevent the reserve currency shift from happening. This is a very slight variation on the position that Martin Armstrong has taken for a long time, saying this is all being driven by the debt crisis, this overhang that all this, not just the United States, but all the other major countries in the world, and particularly in the West. So the point he then makes is that the Russians and the Chinese and the rest of the world, for that matter, they see the writing on the wall. And so they're getting out. And the way that they're getting out of this so that they don't collapse along with it is that they've started the BRICS system of countries. And the initial kind of objective of BRICS was to essentially eliminate the ability of the dollar being the reserve currency in the world. And what that does, if you think about this, is it removes the major way in which the United States can pay their debts. And so what you've got is this giant planetary move going on to try to, by the rest of the world, who clearly have decided that they don't like the way they've been treated for the past few decades. They are going to, rather than sit around and watch it all collapse, they are going to move first, and they are going to kind of pull the rug out from underneath the United States and the Western world. And they are going to pay all of their debts in other currencies other than the dollar. Kim.com goes on to say that no matter who's going to be the next US president, there's no fixing this, right? The only thing that we can hope for is that someone comes along, it comes in, who is honest about this and who is a crisis manager who can come in and take and make this kind of fall not as bad as it needs to be. And it's inevitably it's going to be. And what is worse, the United States goes bankrupt, isn't the hegemon anymore, but can rebuild, or a nuclear war that is going to wipe out humanity, or at least 98% of humanity. You know, I mean, people really need to understand this. And he says the United States and Western partners right now are unfortunately taking us in the direction of World War III. And they're essentially trying to tell Putin, look, we are crazy enough to go to World War III. You know, if you don't back down with your BRICS plan, we're going to go all the way. That's a very succinct kind of summary, it seems to me, of the situation as both of you have articulated here going into this session today. This is existential. This is somebody is going to die, whether literally or figuratively, out of the back end of this kind of thing. And so it's all the glass cards are on the table, are getting ready to be thrown onto the table. And we're going to see who takes the whole pot out of the back end. And it really doesn't look particularly well for the United States in particular. Now, that's the big picture, and you can lay this out. And again, I would suggest to you that if you're not familiar with him, that you go look at Martin Armstrong, because he looks specifically at the kind of the financial and the debt overhang, and it's a very deep and very sophisticated kind of explanation of what's driving all this, and the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum and all the kind of things that they're doing to try to collapse the economy and the food supply and everything else is all attempt to get out from under this obligation of this extraordinary debt that is impossible to repay. David Martin has been with us at transition talks here at Berkeley Springs. And 3 years ago, he built the logic about how that by 2027, 2028, at the very least, it becomes absolutely impossible in any kind of terms for the United States to pay any of their debt. And this was not factoring in BRICS and the other kind of activities that are going on. But by 2027, the whole thing collapses. There's no Social Security, there's no Medicaid, there's the pension funds all fail because they're all built upon the requirement that they invest their money into municipal government kind of financial instruments, and those are the most vulnerable in the middle of all of this thing. And so what you see is this just kind of converging from a number of directions, from one era to another one. And so what's going on is kind of high level planetary poker game, right? Now, I would suggest to you that I have now recently had a number of sources, there probably a half a dozen now, that all suggest that this is not only what we're talking about here, but something much larger that's going on at a higher level. That in fact, that it's a cosmic kind of poker game, if you will, if you want to continue the metaphor. And that in fact, what is mirrored down in the place where we are playing right now is a similar kind of a poker game that's going on between the dark forces and let's call them the light forces. Call the dark forces, if you will, what? The Illuminati, whatever, something higher than just the national countries that are unhappy with each other, or the intelligence communities, or the politics, or the economic kinds of stuff. There's a larger kind of conflict. There's a resolution that's trying to be worked out. Well, the indications that I have are that there is systematic attempt to kind of prepare the battlefield. And I'll be brief about this. I'd suggest that you take a look at the postscript session that I just published just recently in the last day or so. And you can find that on the Arlington Institute website, because I build out this whole scenario. And the situation is essentially that there is this kind of titanic, cosmic negotiation that's going on. There have been enough positive progress that have been made by the light forces, if you will, all the way down to the number of people on this planet who have broadened their awareness and enlightenment and consciousness. And it is starting to build a capability that is an effective countermeasure to the dark forces and what they're doing. So much so that apparently the writing's on the wall, and the dark forces see that they're not going to get out of this thing the way it's going, if it continues the way it's going. But they've got one more card to play, and what they're essentially saying is, in the same way that Kim.com just talked about, if you're going to play this thing to the end, we're going to take the whole thing down in the process. The way they want to do that is that they want to set off an electromagnetic pulse across the United States, 3 missiles going into the air from a ship, from a container ship in the Gulf of Mexico, fire the missiles at high, and these nuclear blasts at very high altitudes, and essentially take out all of the grid. If you find this notion interesting, and you want to explore some more about that, I'd suggest a book called 1 Second After by William Fortschen, Fortschen. Not only that, then there is the possibility of a tsunami coming in off of the Atlantic Ocean and taking out essentially the East Coast. Russia has put 6 nuclear submarines into the Atlantic Ocean, stationed somewhere off the East Coast, all of which have these extraordinary torpedoes that can run at something like 200 miles an hour and have a nuclear device on the end, and are designed specifically to blow up and develop a huge wave that's 200 feet tall and running at 100 miles an hour or something like that. And it just takes out all of the East Coast of the United States. And so they're sitting there here telling everybody else what they're going to do and what they can do. And so this is all jockeying around, presumably, hopefully, because what seems to be, or reportedly is in play, is the possibility that, and understand that there are non-human forces that are playing on both sides and that have a dog in this fight, if you will. And on the light forces side, they also have extraordinary kind of capabilities. And what they are offering to the dark forces is that we'll take you to another planet, and it will be a wonderful place, and you could stay there for the rest of your life and have a wonderful time. And so that's the deal that's on the table. This is a really giant thing. This is the product of at least 6 different sources that I have for the next 6 months at key dates in August and say November and January, and go out to large groups of intuitives and ask them what they think and see. You get a very common kind of picture that says, by the end of August, there's no US government, there's no Canadian government, there's no transportation, nobody can get around. That's a EMP. And so this is corroborated on a whole kind of different, I've never seen anything in my professional life that has such kind of corroboration. So the question that we're going to talk about today is, so how do you prepare for something if something like this happens? All of the sources presume, number one, that there are a critical mass of people that come out of the back of whatever this scenario is that are able to rebuild the world. You know, this is certainly not a certainty, but it's certainly big. It certainly should get all of our attention. And part of that, if you were kind of prudent in all of this, is to say, how do I get ready for something like this? We don't have much time, and so let's talk about it. Gregg, you want to start?
So, John, I'm hearing a lot of the things that you're hearing. And when I hear those things, if you really think about the interconnected nature of the world and all the systems of the world, to take out the United States would have such a devastating impact on the world. It would have a devastating impact on Russia, on their economy, because so much of their economy is tied up with us, China as well. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. Excuse me, I wouldn't be surprised to see a limited grid outage in the US. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. We've got a whole video series on this. I want people to be able to see how it works. The way the US grid is set up, essentially 3 major grids, and they are tied together, but they are also independent grids. So it'd be possible to do a lot of damage by taking out one grid and not take out the others. So I didn't know that was how we were going to begin today. Penny, I don't think you knew either.
No.
Not exactly. But I think the point here, and what I want to say to our community, is I think whether the things that John has talked about happen or not, is that we have to be honest with ourselves and say, this isn't business as usual. This isn't your mom and dad's typical shift of the ages that we're living in. We're barreling down a path toward what many people see as this 2030 endpoint for a lot of reasons, both geophysically, cosmologically, as well as politically. And we've talked about that in other events. What we're seeing is nations, organizations, and power structures jockeying for position to be in the best possible place when this happens. And what that says to me, John, it opens the door. We don't know what's going to happen. We know it's not business as usual. We know that we live in a very fragile infrastructure, and that it doesn't take much to upset that infrastructure. And in my particular community, I'm amazed at how many people are reluctant to embrace that reality. They just don't want to go there. And I can understand it's less stressful maybe if they don't, because they live their lives as if this is business as usual. The problem is that when things break, it becomes very stressful. And it's only a problem if we're not prepared for it. If we are prepared for a disruption in supply chains, for example, which are one of the first things that everyone is going to notice, whether we get an EMP attack or not. We could have bad weather, we could have terrorist attack, we can have localized grid outages. The supply chains are going to be the first place to take that hit. And I have friends that live in New York City, for example, who have lived all of their lives in a culture where they keep very little in their own homes or their apartments. What they do is they go to work, they're professionals. They dedicate their lives to their profession, and on the way home, they stop at the market and get what they need for that day, for that dinner, for that night, which is very European. It's very cool. I like that. It's fresh produce. It's a lot of fun until it's not available. John, your question that you asked, we get these questions at the beginning of the week. What can we do to fully be prepared for the disruptions on the horizon? The experts are telling us it's not a matter of if, it simply is when it's going to happen. May happen in July, may happen before the election, it may happen over the holidays, and we don't know. At some point, we are going to take a hit in some way that will disrupt our daily lives and our supply chains and the way we live. And I think the first thing that needs to happen to be fully prepared is to shift our thinking. And this is probably the hardest thing for a lot of people, to shift the thinking away from being taken care of by others to the very real possibility we may have to take care of ourselves, our families, and our communities without the assistance of others. And once you make that shift, then it opens the door to a lot of possibility. That probably is the hardest thing to do. So I have an entire course that I've designed called Radical Resilience that helps people to make that shift across 5 domains, across the mental domain, the psychological domain, the physiological domain, the emotional domain, and the spiritual domain. And it's based on peer-reviewed psychology beyond the scope of what I can do well here today. But I want, John Penny, we didn't talk about this. I want to make this available. I've asked my office if they go, I'm going to give you a link. And if you enter a code, there's 50% discount. It's the whole course. It's a 5-week course because it will help to prepare the thinking for what we're doing right here. What I want to do in the time I have remaining, what I'm finding is when I have this conversation with our audience is people overwhelmed, John and Penny, they don't even know where to begin. They just say, I've never thought that way. It's too late for me to start growing a garden. I don't even know where to begin. So what I want to do, we don't usually do this on Quartet, but I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through a brief presentation covering 3 areas of energy, food, and water, of where people can go right now, today. I'm going to show you prices. I'm going to show you how to go about doing these things just in the near term. If you're concerned and if you haven't made any preparations at all of how you can maybe have a little backup power, how you can have a little backup food, how if your water supply, we lose a grid, we lose water, we lose electricity, we lose a lot of communications, we lose a lot of things people don't even think about. We probably lose transportation. We're probably not going to be driving our vehicles if the kinds of things happen that John is talking about, either because of energy or because we will not be allowed to be mobile. And that's a very real possibility that's being talked about as well. Okay, can you see a slide on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so to the shift in thinking, the course, if you go to courses.greggbraden.com, go to Radical Resilience is the title of the course. It's been out there since COVID. A lot of people have benefited from this. And enter the code Quartet, you get a 50% discount on that through the end of July. I wanted to make that available. What I want to say is these kinds of things are only a problem if we're not prepared. I have an entire YouTube video on a deep cyber attack and global grid breakdown. It's an hour long. Go to my official YouTube channel. You can see the 3 sections of the American power grid. Very clearly, you can see where you are in that grid. And a lot of what I'm going to do now, you'll see in more detail. So I want you to have that on YouTube. I'm giving you resources here. What I want to say is electricity. There's a good chance we'll lose electricity for some period of time. That means different things to different people. This can be a really fun family activity. You can get the kids, the parents, the neighbors around the table and say, look, if things went away, what's important to us? And everybody gets to identify what's important to them, and then you get to go out and source it. We talk about electricity. There are little solar generators like this one right here, and I own a couple of these. I keep a small hospital in the back of my truck, and this is part of my small hospital. It's called an AEMTOM 440 watts of a solar generator. It's about $500. You can get it on Amazon. And here's what you can do with it. You can run everything. You can do Wi-Fi. You can run a CPAP if you're doing any kind of medical things. You can run TV, radio, I mean, all kinds of things with this. So you get the idea. There's a lot of things you can do. It's not that powerful. It'll get you by. Medium use, I have multiple of these stations, a 3,300 watt peak a unit. It's a lithium ion battery. We just used these last week when our power was cut for 2 days to do electrical work. And these kept our refrigerator going. It kept all of the hot water. It kept lights. I ran my office, everything off of these units. They're about a little over $1,000 a piece. And they've got AC outlets. They've got USB outlets. They charge quickly. They just run everything. You can run a microwave. You can run, again, medical equipment. It's just, it's 1,800 watts output, 3,300 watts max. So these are things you could order these and you could have them within the week if people are really concerned about what's happening right now. These are the solar panels that go with it. You can charge them AC from the wall plug when the power's up. You can charge them from your cigarette lighter in your vehicle. You can charge them on the solar. If you want full house backup, heavy duty use, Generac is a company that does beautiful backup generators. This is a 22 kilowatt. It looks like an air conditioner outside your house. It's going to take longer to order this and set it up, but it is available. These will run on propane or they will run on natural gas. 22 kilowatt or 24 kilowatt. One's almost 6,000. One is a little over 7,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's not that much if everything is down and you're the only one in the neighborhood that's got some power. So I'm saying full house, full farm, wells, everything backup are available on these. So I want people to see that there are some very concrete options. You can get them by the end of the week. And I'm moving quickly here. Water, a lot of people don't realize power goes down. It means that water cannot be pumped into your house. There's a storage system, and everything I'm sharing with you, I'm using. Even that Generac we've got on our land, we're using it. We have these water bricks, 3.5 gallons a piece. They are shaped so they can be stacked. They're not too heavy. You can carry them. Each brick, you put an additive in there to kill the bacteria, and it will last for a long period of time. You can stack them, put them under your bed. You can put them in the closet. You can get 6 of these for $116 off of Amazon. Food is a big one, and it's not just about having some cans of soup, which is okay. But I want you to know that there are a lot of different options. This particular company, Survive, number 2, Thrive. This is great, 40 days. And these are not prepared meals. They are $300. They're not fully prepared meals. What you have is the things you need to prepare the meals. And let me show you what you've got. You've got things like here it is right here. Oats, rice, millet, garbanzo, lentils, black beans, pinto beans, quinoa, superfood, chia seeds, miso, Cajun. And I'm speaking quickly, but I just want you to know these are out there. You can have as many of these, 40 days for one person. All right. If you want fully prepared meals, there is a company called Valley Food Storage, and they do fully prepared meals, $200, 80 servings, and they've got everything in there, and it's nice food. We use it sometimes when I'm busy, and it's not an emergency. It's an emergency because I have to eat before I come on the Quartet with John and Penny. And so I'll run and have one of these breakfasts. So they're really good. They're healthy, nutrient dense. And what I'm saying is you probably don't want to eat anything during the bad times you wouldn't eat during the good times. You want to be healthier than ever. And this is one of the ways to be able to do that. If things get bad, at least you have been responsible and you're taking responsibility for you and your family. These are basics, but I want you to have something that you can use right this minute. So I spoke quickly. I went longer than I thought I would, and I'm going to stop right there.
Thank you. That's most helpful. Penny Kelly, what do you have to say about this?
Oh, wow. So I took the question, how do you prepare? And just made a mental list of, what have I done over the years? Because all this is something that I was shown with the little man in brown robes like 45 years ago. And so I think the absolutely most important critical thing is to know that it's coming. And don't stop with the fear. Acknowledge the fear and keep going and start asking yourself, okay, what can I do? You could do a lot in a fairly short amount of time. So I think to know that it's coming is the first thing, and to acknowledge the fear and get over it or get beyond it. I think the thing to be aware of is that this is not, don't think of this event as something that is designed to take you down. It is really designed to push you into a lifestyle that is sustainable, that is nature compatible, that collaborates with nature. And we have gotten way far away from that kind of collaboration, from that kind of lifestyle. And so earlier, when you guys said there was a very fragile infrastructure, oh my, it is incredibly fragile. And why is it so fragile? It's because everybody is in the mindset that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. And so they don't have the skills. They aren't prepared mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. And so if that infrastructure around us breaks down, so will the people. If you have the mindset, if you have gotten healthy, bothered to develop your health, keep your muscles up, take your vitamins, eat good food, etc., get a good night's sleep. If you have made the effort to do at least some of that, then you have some resilience. If you have studied different ways of living, or you know some of the old skills, you have a little more resilience. If you have the backup generator that can get your well going, you have even more resilience. So the next thing that you would need is books, some sort of reference. You need a small library. You know, how do you do this and how do you do that? And some of those books are going to be garden books. Some of those are going to be medical reference books. Some of those are going to be recipe books and things to do with food. Some of those will be construction or small engine repair but you need a small library that you can refer to if Google is not available. So I think the next thing, once you get those things under your belt, you can kind of get to the truth of the matter. The first thing to know is that, you know, there's problems. But don't go any further than that. Wait until don't waste your time worrying about, you know, why and what and all that, because you're wasting precious time. And so you have to do two things. The next step is back to the mental. One is you have to practice handling different scenarios in your head, so that if there's a bomb that, you know, goes off in your neighborhood, what do you do first and what do you do second? If there's a flood or a tsunami, where do you go? If there's, you know, forest fire, because they're starting fires here and there, what's your evacuation plan from your house? And, you know, if it's an earthquake, what's likely to fall? And can you get through the house without something falling on you? You have to do some scenario planning in your own head. And while you're doing that, you can begin to recognize that we really don't have a government anymore. We have been run by a criminal syndicate for years, since the end of World War II. And that's what's going down. And that is what you want to see go away, the criminal syndicate. All the other nice stuff we would love to keep. But, you know, we'll keep some of it and we'll rebuild a lot of it much better. So I think the next thing that you have to be aware of is, what is your location? Are you in a safe location? You know, if you're living on the San Andreas Fault, you might want to think about a little other spot. If you're living in the middle of New York City does not have a very positive future. I'm sorry for those of you that are in New York, but think about your location. And I have seen people streaming out of cities on the East Coast, moving into the interior, trying to get to a rural location. I think the next thing that you need to be aware of is if you are a newcomer in a rural location and they don't have what they need, you might not be welcome. What's your plan then? Don't wait until it becomes an emergency. If you can go now while it's still calm, it feels like you're making stuff up. But in the end, what you go back to the goal, which is to move everybody towards sustainable living. What we have, the infrastructure we have, is not sustainable as we are using it or living it. So I think in terms of money, preparation, have a little bit of cash, a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver, and have some ammunition. You know, I don't usually talk about guns and ammunition, but I'm a farmer. You have to have guns and you have to have ammunition. And you have to know how to use those for defense purposes only, not so you can steal somebody else's goodies. So all of that leaves you in a place where I think you have a basic readiness. If you have nothing but canned food, be sure you have a mechanical can opener, not an electric one. If you have half the stuff you need, think about what would you need to fill in the other half? Where would you get fresh, in other words? Do you know how to live off the land? You know, can you recognize the difference between, say, ragweed and lamb's quarter, which you can eat lamb's quarter? Do you know what wild garlic looks like? Do you know what you can do with clover? Or there's all kinds of herbs that grow across the land that are very good in terms of healing. Do you have a medical kit? So if you get to the point where you think you're ready, then sit back and watch. It might go well. There's so many things that are collapsing right now that it's a perfect storm. It's going to be pretty hard to avoid everything in that perfect storm. But if like John, I like your term, John, come out the back end. If you can come out the back end with yourself intact, your family pretty much intact, and some of your tools and your skills and your knowledge and some community left, you have a gold mine right in the palm of your hand. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very helpful as well. Let me just tie this up. You have to have a mindset going into this, and you need to understand that this is a good deal. That is to say, this is about the evolution of humanity and rising to a new occasion. And that everything that is presented to us is given to us as an opportunity to rise and learn how to do things better and become someone better. And so this is not negative. This is about how do you engage this and how do you really become better in this whole process. And by the way, if you want a better world, you can't get to a better world without the old world going away, and certainly in rapid terms, as we're talking about. This is a necessary kind of evolution process here where the old reality implodes and it provides the vacuum for the emergence of a new world. And so you need to understand that, and you understand that this is really a marvelous kind of opportunity in terms of the future of humanity and our species. I think from an emotional point of view, as I've alluded to, that there is a kind of a mindset that one has to have. I mean, this is not the time to get flustered. This is not the time to get, this is the time, as Penny suggests, where you stand up here and say, what are we going to do? Get the people together, use your time well, do priorities, and get yourself some basic sustenance, so that you can kind of make your way through this thing. Certainly have a plan. Certainly have some, and there are organizations like American Contingency. You can go there and they've got whole plans and schedules and things, and they talk about communications and so on. That's, by the way, I'm also very active in ham radio kind of things for emergency communications, so that you have some communications when, if and when things go down. You need this mindset that gives you kind of emotional sense that this is our chance to build a new world, literally. What we've got to do is work our way through the next few months, and then we get a chance to run really fast and do some extraordinary things. And this is really a major, extraordinary kind of opportunity and transition to get higher levels of consciousness. The natural kind of transition here is to move into a more congruent kind of relationship with nature. There's this kind of analog rather than digital kind of direction, it seems to me, and that there is so much going on in terms of nature and intelligence and wisdom that we do not understand on a day-to-day basis, and the ability to kind of move forward is almost certainly not based upon getting more technology, but is about trying to broaden your awareness. There's also a social component here that's really quite important. You need people around you who are all working in the same direction that you're going, that are there to back you up, that everybody's helping each other. The whole idea is to be with a like-minded group that will support and be part of the solution. I would agree with Penny that you have to have books. We need to stand up and go and do what we're supposed to do and link ourselves up with other like-minded people. Go ahead, Penny.
I think I want to bring up something that I originally thought I wouldn't, but I think it may be important. I think we're going to lose some people, maybe a lot of people. Do you know how to work with somebody who is dying? Do you know how to hospice them over to the other side so that they are as comfortable as possible, as ready as possible, and they're not afraid? Do you have the guts to face that kind of work, number one? And have you thought about what happens if somebody really critical in your life leaves? What do you do then? Think about losing people without planning on losing people. So I hope that's coming across okay.
Penny, I think came across beautifully, and I appreciate you. You know, there's so many other directions we could have gone in addition to what we did. And I think we will all say goodbye to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I were listening to this today and I hadn't heard a lot of these before, for some people, I'm just going to acknowledge, I know it's a very different way of thinking. And I hear that from a lot of people. I think the important thing to keep in mind, this isn't like forever. This is this little window of time, and where we have to have a mindset. Do we survive? Do we take care of ourselves through this, or do we succumb? Do we just say, I'm going to live the life I live now, or I'm not going to be here? And there are some people that, you know, that are making that choice. Ultimately, I think, John, you nailed it. You know, at the big picture, these are expressions of a fundamental battle between good and evil that has been playing out from the beginning. And so, Penny, that the spiritual dimension of our relationship to good and evil plays a powerful role in helping people to transition from this world into another world. It's not just whether or not you read the Bible or whether or not you pray, but it is how you relate and the story that you embrace about your relationship to these fundamental forces. And I think that's what we're seeing playing out. So I want to thank you for bringing that up. I think it is important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
thank you both. You want go ahead, Penny.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
Well, Thank you both for this very provocative conversation. We're coming to you from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town where the Arlington Institute holds forth. We have a number of programs all related to this big change. One of our programs is called Transition Talks. And we have a speaker that comes from somewhere in the world every month to our little town. And then we brought live stream the information across the planet. And we have Terry Cochran coming up here in July, who knows all about how to deal with major kind of diseases and things just with food and supplements. And she's been very successful at that. So thank you, and thank you all. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise. And we'll look forward to being with you then. So let's end there, as we always do, by saying, what do you think's going to happen in the next couple of weeks? Go ahead, Greg.
Next 2 weeks, I think we're going to see a lot of movement in terms of positioning for war, reenacting the draft, some form of the draft here in the United States. There are military bases that are gearing up. All the signs are there. I don't think we'd see them unless we were preparing for war. A lot of people aren't aware of that, and I think we're going to see increasing momentum around that, and we will see reports coming in from the front in Ukraine as well as Israel and Lebanon. We're hearing that U.S. troops may be on the ground in the Middle East in that war as well. So our country's going to have to make some decisions about where we send our young people and what it is that we're willing to fight for. And I think that's going to be up in the next 2 weeks.
Yep. Penny?
So I think the two things that have come up for me in the next 2 weeks are something around Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm not sure he's still there 2 weeks from now. So we'll see if that happens, or if there's just maybe some sort of big change in how he works or what his power is or his position. The other thing is, I see the march toward financial Armageddon pretty much happening like continuously over the next whole month, and it starts like at the 4th of July. So, that, and then I think probably the last thing I would say is I continue to monitor this wonderful rise and toughening of the human consciousness in America, which I absolutely love, because I started to say earlier and didn't say, the infrastructure we live within and that is holding us up is very fragile because we are very fragile. But what I see is we are becoming less fragile and much tougher and more resilient and much wiser. Not everybody, but a significant number. And that makes that whole infrastructure issue much less threatening, which I love.
Good. And let me just close by kind of tying this together in one way, and that is to remind you again that this scenario that we've painted is not the only one. There is a clear message that has come from multiple sources that say, in terms of the grand strategy of the white hats, if you will, is that the whole objective that they're working on is to drive us right up to the edge of the cliff, to where you get this solidification of will by the people to say, we're not going to do this anymore. And so no more wars and so on. And what that turns into in Martin Armstrong terms is next year, 2025 to 2027, what he calls a global civil war, where there you have this general uprising about people against their government. Why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they just got walked up to the edge of the cliff of global World War III, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. And so that's 2 years to go to 2027. And then you get a chance to rebuild it, start rebuilding everything in a new way. So it may be just working the scenario. That may be the way it works out. And in that case, everything, all the infrastructure is still in place, and we got rid of all of the leadership, and you get yourself a chance to build a new world. So Who
What
knows?
leadership.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we'll be here and we'll be there and we'll be here at Quartet and we'll talk to you about it if that's what happens. So thanks so much. And we'll look forward to you. Take care, you all.
Thank you all so much. Thank you,
Thank-
Penny. Thank you, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, John. See you soon.